good afternoon, folks. Welcome to one more wonderful interview on Feni for the Soul. This time it is the filmmaker, the noted filmmaker Shyam Benegal, who really doesn't need any introduction in India and across the world. Over the last 4 decades, Shyam Benegal has made some wonderful movies, starting with Ankur, uh, Nishant, Bhumika, Manthan, Junoon, such masterpieces which all won national awards and critical acclaim across the globe, in all the international festivals. Um, Mr. Benegal also made some wonderful television serials. The most popular being Bharat Ek Khoj, which was based on Jawaharlal Nehru's Discovery of India book. He also made Yatra, which was based on our, majestical Indian railways, on the wonder that is the Indian railways. That was also very popular. Um, sure enough, Mr. Benegal has been awarded with the highest awards in the nation, the Padma Bhushan, followed by the Dada Saheb Phalke Award for filmmaking, and he was member of the parliament for a whole term between 2006 and 2012 in the Rajya Sabha. Now, fortunately for me and us in the family, Shyam Benegal is my mother's older brother, hence my mama. So in our Chitrapur Saraswat community style, I'm going to refer to him as Shyam Mam in this interview. So, Shyam Mam, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm well.
Wonderful.
It's a dreadful rainy day, though.
Shyam Mam,
otherwise fine. I mean,
it's the monsoon.
No other complaints.
Yeah, I know, but it's the monsoon, so we must welcome the rains. Yeah, it's nice and green in Goa. It's been raining here also, but intermittently, so we get time to cycle and run and all that, and it's great fun in Goa. Anyway, my first question, Shyam, is, the late Guru Dutt, the wonderful film director, was your paternal cousin. So, how much of an influence was Guru Dutt on your own filmmaking,
Well, he was not much of an influence in terms of the way I made my films or the kind of subject matter of my films, or even the manner in which the form of film, or none of those things had influenced me. But what Guru Dutt's greatest contribution, as far as I'm concerned, was, in terms of the impact he had. Because when he made his first film, Bazi, that was the year was 1950, and he was barely 25 years old. And it was amazing that I was in school at the time, and when I saw that film, I said, "My God, it's my ambition to be a filmmaker as well, but I have to break this record." He made his very first feature film at the age of 25. And I said, if I can't make my first feature film at 25, life is not worth living. It's one of those crazy things that when you're a kid, you think about. And that's how it was. So I was he was a hugely inspirational figure in that sense. And in fact, it was good that he was an inspirational figure, and that business of making his first feature film at the age of 25, which is a very, very rare occurrence. Most people at that age are still assistants to various directors. Maybe they just start their career in the film business as a third or fifth assistant and things like that. But here was Guru Dutt, who already made his first film, and which was also very successful. And so he, in that sense, was always an inspirational figure. And also I think to a large extent that also shaped my or worked out my career. Because otherwise I wasn't very clear about what I wanted to do in life. But I think even before I came into college, his success with his very first film, it kind of got me, fixed to the idea that I have to be a filmmaker. And that was the whole thing. And that, I think, is very, very important, because if you are sure about what you want to do, as I was at that time and continue to be, it was marvelous, because there's no confusion in your head about what you're wanting to do. The only problem for me at that time, when I went into college, was, suppose I don't succeed in making films, I must have a fallback situation. What is that fallback situation going to be? And the fallback situation in my case, because I was growing up in Hyderabad, was the fact that I might, because I was reasonably good in my studies, and there were certain subjects which I was particularly fond of, which I was getting my BA and eventually my MA in, which is economics and political science, and history, and so on. So I said, well, if nothing else, I can start teaching, and I can still make a living. Now that was the important thing. And so I worked while I was planning to become a filmmaker, training myself to write film scripts and all sorts of things, and watching film after film after film as much as I possibly could, to the chagrin, actually, of my parents. My mother thought that it was ridiculous that I should be spending so much time in cinema halls. And my father thought that it was very bad for my health, because cinema halls in those days, as you know, smoking was allowed. So which meant that when you went to see a film, you were always enveloped in a cloud of smoke while you're watching the film. It was terrible, awful. But the fact is, and I was so crazy about film, so I was watching film after film, which meant 3 or 4 films a week. And we had this cinema, which was a garrison cinema, for the army. And that particular cinema used to have 2 changes in a week. There was always an Indian film for the weekdays, and weekends there used to be films in English. And so, there's no way one was short of material to watch. So there was, and after a while, when I befriended the operator, then I could see films for free from his booth, and so there was no need even to ask parents for money to see a film. It was just a question of fibbing and saying that I hadn't gone to see a film when actually I had, that sort of thing. But it really was eventually excellent training for me, because not only had I been watching films and unconsciously and subconsciously learning about cinema, that when I actually started making films, even when I was in advertising, which was my first job, I was in advertising and I was a copywriter there. And soon enough, of course, the agency, particularly Rentas, the agency felt that I would probably be far more useful, not so much as a copywriter, as much as an advertising filmmaker. So they got me to write scripts, and it was like a dream. It was not difficult for me at all to write film scripts. I found it easier to write film scripts than to write advertising copy. So, it came quite naturally. And then I was in the film department. Alec Padamsi was my boss. And he, of course, being a theater person, used to spend a lot of his free time in the theater, sometimes even working hours, office working hours, doing his theater rehearsals. He would give me a free hand when it came to advertising films. We used to hire producers, but I would go write the scripts, direct them, and so on and so forth. So in about the first 10 or 12 years of my working life, I'd already made about over 300 advertising films. So naturally, there was so much experience of filmmaking. And so there's no difficulty at all. When actually I planned to make a film, my first feature film, I was waiting for that opportunity. It didn't happen when I was 25. It happened when I was 38. So, it really took much longer than I had wanted to, but then couldn't help it. But when I made my first film, which was Ankur, it was a first film for many people. It's the first film for my cameraman, Govind Elani. It was the first film for the writer who was writing the script, Satyajit Ray, was a great figure in the theater already. And then it was the first film for me, of course, both for the script that I wrote and so on, and for the actors. For Anant Nag, that was his first film. And Shabana, she'd made some small film before that, but it actually turned out to be the film that launched her career. So you see, it was first for so many people, and then it went and won the National Award and won any number of awards all over the world. So my career had already begun, and my direction was absolutely set. So there's no question about my doing anything else. So that was it. After that, of course, it's only a question of challenges of individual films and success and failure at the box office.
Fascinating. Shyam, I would like to move to Satyajit Ray now, because you made a wonderful documentary on Mr. Ray, and you have been a big admirer of Mr. Ray. So, was he an influence on your style of filmmaking? Something of Ray influenced you? His craft?
You see, the important thing is, when I was in college, now, of course, there was Guru Dutt, who was a cousin, who was already a hugely successful filmmaker, and he was an inspirational figure. But the fact is, I actually discovered what I considered good cinema. Cinema in terms of, in inverted commas, what the medium actually is. How do you tackle cinema? What is cinema compared to, let's say, theater or other entertainment media? What is the big thing about cinema? What is the grammar of cinema? All of those things, suddenly I discovered with the man called Satyajit Ray. I had gone in my college days, I was a very successful swimmer. I was my college, freestyle swimming champion, my university freestyle swimming champion. I represented my state at the national swimming championships in different parts of India. And so for one particular national tournament, I had gone to Calcutta. And when I'd gone to Calcutta, knowing my interest in cinema, my uncle, which is Bakul Bapa, my father's youngest brother, who was a commercial artist, and he used to have a studio where he did all the publicity work for films, different film companies, and also for foreign films. So that was a hugely successful commercial artist studio. And he, knowing my interest in films, he said to me, why don't you go and see the film made by an ex-commercial artist? His name is Satyajit Ray. I don't think much of that film, but why don't you go and see it since you're here in Calcutta? So I went and saw this film called Panchali. And it blew my mind. I had gone for a screening in the afternoon, meaning early afternoon. It was a weekend. Now there used to be shows at 1:30, 3:30 or 4, then 7 and 9 or 10 or whatever. So I went and I saw the same film for the first show, for the second show, for the third show, for the fourth show before I came home. Because that's how much I was, I mean, it blew my mind. I said, I've never seen anything like this. It was extraordinary. The way it was filmed, photographed, the naturalism of it, the storytelling ability without necessarily having melodramatic situations, none of those things. But here was somebody who was making a film that seemed immediately like a slice of life. It was quite something. And having seen that film so many times, I just said, I have to meet this man. I can't leave Calcutta without meeting him. So it so happened that in Bombay at the time, because I was in advertising, and there was another agency, but the head of that agency was actually in Calcutta. And his wife was a cousin of Ray's. And so somebody, I don't know how, but I got introduced to her. And then she took me to meet Satyajit Ray. And I went to meet him in his little apartment, where with a lot of books of his and his kind of drawing pad, because he used to sit on a chair and had this drawing pad in front of him. You sketch and write and do all sorts of things there next to a large window, and that's where he was all the time. And I went to meet him, which was in the afternoon, and then we sat and chatted, which means he was talking, I was listening. This went on from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon until about 8:30 at night, when Ray's wife got very upset with me for keeping him away from his dinner. So I had to leave. But I'd become a devotee, and that relationship remained until he passed away. Because every time I went to Calcutta, I would go visit him. And of course, there was a lot we could discuss about films, which was wonderful because, it was something that, because, I loved the way he used to make his films. Although there may have been different opinions, varying opinions about different films of it. But the only person he probably would accept a negative comment on his films was probably me. And maybe a British film critic, a very famous British film critic called Derek Malcolm. Otherwise, he never thought that he did a thing wrong, because naturally he was a towering personality, not just as a person, because he was tall. He was about 6 feet 2 inches or 6 feet 3 inches tall. He was a very tall man, and he used to loom above everybody else. But more than that, in world cinema, he was a figure to be reckoned with, because everybody through his lifetime always saw him as one of the 10 best filmmakers of the world. And so there was this thing, his views and attitudes and so on, to be able to sit and discuss films with him, and to sometimes occasionally disagree with him, was something that the Bengalis thought was simply not done. But Ray, being Ray, was very, I don't know, I don't think it was condescending, but he certainly was very accommodating. Because later, when the films division wanted to make a film, there were series of films that Films Division at that time was making on all the great artists of the country, different artists. And so there was this film to be made on Satyajit Ray. And I had just started to make documentaries at that time. So I said, this Film Division people asked me, would you like to make a film on Ray? I said, absolutely. I jumped at the idea. They said, of course I'll make a film on Ray. And then I said, what kind of length will the film be? So they said, well, maximum of 18 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, because that's the amount. That was the slot that Films Division used to get to show their films before the main feature started in shows in different cinemas all over the country. But when I started making the film, instead of 20 minutes, I got money to make a 20-minute film. But I ended up by making a film that was 2 hours and 20 minutes long. It was a complete exposition of the man and his work and examples of different aspects of his style, his editing style, his writing style, the way the kind of use of his lenses, how he paced his film, all this kind of thing. So it was a long and detailed film about him, which, of course, it was a very useful film eventually, because it was a film that the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York, kept and has it in their library in places like Toronto and all over the Western world, Eastern world as well. Because I remember there was an order placed with Films Division by the Chinese government, I think, and so on. So that film traveled all over the place, because it was actually the only complete film on his work. Nobody else had done that. But later on, several other filmmakers made films. And my film, in the process, got cannibalized for use in their films, portions of my film. Anyway, that's how I guess life goes, but he was an extraordinary filmmaker for his time, of course. When I look back now, I think for his time, he probably was the unquestionably a great master.
Super. Thank you for this lovely explanation. Moving on to some of your actors, you gave a break to a lot of young people, like the late Smita Patil, Shabana Azmi, Nasiruddin Shah, Om Puri, so many of them. But I would like to speak about Shyam, I want you to speak about Smita Patil, because
sure.
Because what made her special?
I think somebody's trying to get to me. Yeah.
What made Smita special?
No, but one of the things was that it was my using new actors or new talent, fresh talent, was not necessarily determined by the fact that I wanted to do so. Because in fact, raising money with the completely unknown cast was very difficult. But it was that choice was really thrust on me because I couldn't afford to pay the kind of wages that you had to pay to known stars. And the kind of subjects I was choosing to make my films were things that no well-known star would touch with a barge pole, because they were not necessarily star-oriented. They were not centered essentially on the male stars, which is how most of our films are. Many of my films were women-centered. All these things actually were going against what was considered the norm in the marketplace. So in a situation like that, I had to get new actors. And in looking for new actors, there was a great amount of advantage at that time, which had just happened. because the FTII in Pune, the Film and Television Institute in Pune, had used to run a course in acting. And that was a much shorter course than the main courses that were offered. Like if you wanted to direct, or you wanted to be a cameraman, you wanted to be sound recordist and all that. These were longer courses. They used to be 3-year courses, 2-year courses. The direction used to be 4 years and so on. But when it came to acting, these courses were much shorter. They were less than a year. And a lot of people made, took advantage of that. And of course, in the film industry itself, a lot of people felt, not younger people at that time, felt that, if you have an actor who is trained, it's always better to take somebody who is trained rather than take an actor who has had no experience, and then your film becomes their training ground. It doesn't make sense because they're kind of training themselves by using you as an institution of learning rather than offering you their talent for which you're paying. So those are the kind of problems that existed. But as far as I was concerned, I was always on the lookout to see if I could get somebody who was trained to some extent. And suddenly, out of the blue, when I was looking to cast for Ankur, at that time, and it was very difficult because all the known actors were saying no. They didn't want to work with somebody who was a real greenhorn like me, and they were not at all impressed with the storyline of my film, and they felt that this would be a real bummer. So I was not attracting any kind of attention. So I had to go after talent, and that's how I was. I was in advertising in those days. So here was this young lady who comes to meet me. She just come out of the film institute. She came to see me in my office. And so I saw her. I said, she's absolutely right for this character of Lakshmi. That was the main central character in my film, Ankur. And I said, you're absolutely perfect for that. And being a person who had grown up in Hyderabad to some extent, because her mother was from Hyderabad, and father, of course, was from UP, but she could, when I wanted to make the film in dialect, in the Dakhni dialect, and she could speak. So there was no problem at all. And so immediately I took her, and that was Shabana. So much of my casting was also the method of casting was set by that film. And I often and mainly started to take new people or people who I had worked before with. So it would be easier for me to function. And then once my film started to find a place in the market, and where it would attract, the attention from finance people, then of course it was not such a big problem in casting, So I could take other people like Smita Patil, a lot of others who are completely new actors at that time who had no kind of exposure at all, and also very unconventional looks for the cinema of that time. So it was in many ways became very interesting. And so the press started to invent terms for films like this. Like in France, soon after the war, when people started to make films that were very different from what the conventional films were, and they were known as Nouvelle Vague, the new wave. So this in some ways became the basis of what later on was called the New Indian Cinema. So, so in the Hindi language films, so I was among the first people to be doing this. But of course, in India being a film industry of vast proportions, because we make films in so many different languages. Each language group has its own, uh, new cinema movement. So you had people like Adur Gopalakrishnan in Kerala, and then you had people, in Marathi, you had Jabbar Patel, and different places you had different people doing different kinds of things. So it was all like that, but it was a very alive scene at the time. So I found the situation very congenial in terms of working.
Nice.
Until, of course, television came,
True. But
Then
Chamma, still
Yeah.
tell us a little about why Smita Patil was so special, because she was, something unique. Can you tell us a little about that or some anecdote?
Well, I'll tell you, one, one of the reasons was because, you see, I was wanting to make a film about an actress who had written, a Marathi actress who had written an autobiography, which was a hugely successful autobiography and was serialized in a Marathi magazine. And the actress was Hansa Wadkar, and she had written in the book called Sankti Aika. And that particular book was given to me by my then partner, Govind Ghanekar. And of course, and I said, look, I don't read Marathi. So he read out the novel to me, and I was absolutely fascinated. And I decided that I have to make a film on that story. So I got, by this time, of course, I think there was no problem with Hansa Wadkar, but I needed to get the rights and things like this, which I got someone to get it for me, etc. But that's not of importance really. But what's important was that when I worked on the script of the film, I was trying to work out a different kind of form as well. So formally, as well as in terms of content, I was trying many things. And for that, I needed to find an actor who was not somebody I could use, who had already used in the past. I wanted somebody who belonged to the culture, the culture of Maharashtra, particularly with the Pune belt and the Konkan area and so on and so forth. And in order to get that, I had to primarily think of actors who were essentially Marathi speaking, but who were very good in Hindi as well. And so while I was looking for all of them, suddenly somebody came and said, look, I'm trying to remember who it was, but somebody said, have you seen this girl called Smita Patil? I said, no. She said, her father is a minister in the Maharashtra cabinet. So I said, okay, then I should ask them. So I called her because she was at St. Xavier's College as a student. When I called her, she came to see me, and she thought that I was an absolute fraud. And this whole business of making a film and all this kind of thing, she said, why would anybody want to choose me to make a film? This is absolute nonsense, etc. But it was a mother's persuasion and certainly her father's persuasion that eventually made her accept this part. And but before I did Bhumika, I had another little part which I needed to fill because that was made just 3 or 4 months before I started on Bhumika, which was Nisha. So I got her to play the second lead in the film. And she was absolutely outstanding. So then I was absolutely very, sure that she was the one I wanted. when I made Bhumika. And of course, rest is history. Because not only did Bhumika win her National Award and this, that, and the other, but it became, she became a well-known actress, not only in India, but she was recognized as a wonderful actress all over the world.
Fascinating, fascinating. I'm going to play.
Now,
Sorry?
you wanted to talk about Manthan.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to Manthan. There is a lovely, I want to play something. Shyam, just give me 2 minutes. I want to play something before we start talking about Manthan. So, Shyam, this song by Preeti Sagar, one second, let me just, sorry.
Well, you see, the story of Manthan. Now, Manthan was an important film for me, but also it was quite unique in many ways. For reasons, I mean, it really had to do with Dr. Kurian, who was a huge charismatic figure in the milk business of the country. Because in the cooperative movement, the milk cooperative movement, he was the real father of the milk cooperative movement of the country. And he became the head of the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation and later created the National Dairy Development Board. And also, he was quite an extraordinary person. Now, he was very keen, because I used to make Amul butter films, advertising films for Amul butter with that little girl, the little mnemonic figure of that little girl, which Absolutely. Is still used Amul by them. Girl. Now, apart from that mnemonic figure of that little girl, there was also, I used to make advertising films about that, for my agency. Then there were around that mnemonic, there were many other things. And, but Dr. Kurian once said to me, he said, all this is fine. We should make a couple of documentaries on the milk cooperative movement in the country. And I said, fine. So we made a couple of documentaries. But he said, yes, these are wonderful documentaries, but where will we show them? I said, that was the point. The point was that there was no platform, no way you could show documentary films on their own. So then he said, all right, what's the best suggestion now? Get down to it, because I want a film that people will see what the milk cooperative movement has done for the country. So I said, we have to make a feature film. But he said, how much will it cost? So I named a figure, which was not much, of course. But the fact was, he said, where will I get this money? I can't go to my farmers and ask them to give me so much money to make a film. So I said, well, I don't know. Maybe what you could do is to tell them whether they would like a film like this about their own experience. So this is precisely what he did. Because, milk in the milk cooperative movement, farmers, that is milk farmers, would be supplying milk morning and evening to people who made milk collection from the cooperatives. And they would pay. The morning's milk was paid for in the evening, and the next morning, the previous evening, money was paid to the farmer. So he simply said, ask them if we can keep back a little bit of the money so that we can make a film about them, about this cooperative. And nobody objected. So there was no question of anybody giving any money. It was just what had to be given to them was reduced, and that money was kept aside for this particular film. And at that time, there were 500,000 farmers in Gujarat who used to provide the daily milk, 500,000. That's why that film opens by saying 500,000 farmers of Gujarat present. So they became the producers of the film. And we had a ready-made bunch of stories because it had become a subject of great research, A lot of research studies were done. And on the basis of those research studies, I came across so many wonderful true stories that we put together and created the story of Manthan. And then, of course, the film itself was made hugely successful by the farmers themselves. So when the film opened, for instance, when the film was premiered in Ahmedabad and Gujarat, in places like Rajkot and various other places, the everybody, all the farmers, particularly the milk farmers, were the original audience for the film. So not only did they fill the theaters, they made it hugely successful all over again. Because the money that came in, the distributors made a profit. The film got released all over the country, later on in different parts of the world. And eventually, Dr. Kurian and I were both invited to the United Nations headquarters in New York. In the General Assembly of the United Nations, we both presented the film to a world audience.
How fascinating.
So it was an incredibly successful film. It was amazing. And so that example where the farmers paid for the film, and then they also earned from the film. And they continued to earn for at least 20 years or 25 years after that. It's broken all kinds of records. But it's an amazing thing. It really was something. And it made a star of everybody who was associated with it. Particularly when, Smita was in that film. She's absolutely marvelous. Then Nasiruddin Shah was there. Kulbhushan Khanbanda was there. A whole lot of them, they all became stars. Largely because of that film.
Absolutely fascinating film. And that title song is almost haunting. It's a haunting tune. So beautiful.
That was in fact, it's very funny how it was written, and there was a wonderful girl. She was a background singer. She came from a film family, and she sang. She was Gujarati, and so I got her to sing this song, or rather, Vanraj Bhatia did. He was a music director, but didn't have the words. He had the melody. He didn't have the words. And so I said, the content should be this. To come to my village, we have this, we have that, etc. So there was a little girl, another girl, about 12, 13-year-old girl, who was sitting in this recording studio while Vanraj and I were arguing and fighting and usual things that happen when you're recording, before you're recording. And this little girl said, "You don't have lyrics, right? So do you think these lyrics will do?" And so the little girl, she showed that to Vanraj, and which was kind of half Gujarati, half Hindi, written that way. And we recorded that. And not only did that film, that became the theme song of the film, it became the theme for Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation for years afterwards. Even now, sometimes you
They
get
play
it on television.
absolutely
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It goes back to 1976.
fascinating. And
Anyway,
finally, Preeti Sagar sang it as a professional singer.
what else would you like to know?
Yeah, yeah. The now I would like to, I'll show one photograph and then there's a question to that. Just a minute. Now you see this photograph. Do you remember this photo that I shot of you many 20 years back? I shot this photo of
Ah,
you.
yes, but I don't quite remember. This was
I'll tell
for
you what
some,
it is. Shyam,
yeah,
this was you were in
yeah.
Pune, and this is a photo taken in Malacca Spice, Praful's restaurant.
Ah, yes. Oh, yes. This was
Chiru's
the one
restaurant.
that was
Yes.
taken in
And
Malacca
you,
Spice.
this was the year
I
2000,
remember this.
and I
Yeah,
requested
now I
you
remember.
to get
Yeah, yeah,
into the
yeah. I
kitchen,
remember that. Yeah.
and you were very sporting to go and stand in the kitchen with all the chefs.
It's
And
amazing. Yeah.
we put this on the front page of Pune Times, the Times of India publication,
Right, right.
in Pune, when I was a journalist with Times of India. So now, tell us,
Malacca
uh,
Spice, but that is Praful's restaurant, no?
absolutely. So tell me, you have been a foodie. Not everybody knows that you are a very passionate foodie, and you love to sample all kinds of cuisine. So can you tell us about your favorite foods, favorite types of food or cuisine?
Well, I love good food. Basically, and also I think we are very adventurous in food taste in home. We don't just stick to one kind of cuisine. And Neera is a marvelous, not only a marvelous cook, but she's also experiments a great deal. And we are very willing kind of subjects in terms of trying out, that is Pia and myself. So we get outstanding food in our home. And much of this is because of Neera, because her own interest in cuisine is incredible. So that has helped a great deal. And of course, whenever one is traveling, and one is looking to see what kind of food would be that we would like to discover, what kind of cuisine. But as far as I'm concerned now, as I grow older, I prefer East Asian, Southeast Asian, but essentially East Asian cuisine, starting from Japan, China down, Southeast Asia, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I prefer that kind of cuisine to the Western European type of cuisine, which in any case, you know, we get enough of that in our own homes here, and restaurants are not particularly good for that sort of thing.
Wonderful. I'm very tempted to ask you. You spoke about let's say this pandemic now has brought your latest film project to a halt, sadly, the biopic on Mujibur Rahman. So, I want to share a photo here. And, so you have researched Sheikh Mujib extensively now in the last 1 year. What was his magic, Shyam?
You see, he was a very charismatic figure. Charismatic in the sense that um, he had he was a great orator in Bengali, and not only was he a great orator, he had this way of communicating with his people that would immediately make him a kind of confidant, a friend of the people. That's why it was called Bangabandhu, because it was his own character. He was quite an extraordinary person, and he I mean, he is also a great tragic figure, tragic, almost Shakespearean tragic figure, because he had this wonderful band of people who he led to, free East Bengal from the clutches of what essentially was a kind of junta in West Pakistan, and separated it, eventually created the state of Bangladesh. But more than that, there was a kind of trust that went well beyond what politicians should be doing. You know, he trusted everybody openly. I mean, he was a very hugely trusting person. And eventually, he was that trust, the kind of trust he had. You know, politicians must always keep a certain amount of distance between themselves and their followers or whoever, because you see, otherwise, getting them very close is not such a good idea, because sometimes your own closest colleagues are people who probably would like to talk to you, you know, from where you are, and which is precisely what happened, because he was betrayed. Not only was he was betrayed by his own people, you know, by his own uh, close kind of among some of the members of his coterie. So in that sense, he was a tragic figure. He was almost like a Lear-like figure, you know, Shakespearean figure. But he was an absolutely marvelous person, because he whatever he did for Bangladesh was quite extraordinary. Of course, he couldn't see the fruit of what he planted. Um, his daughter is now carrying on and doing a wonderful job, because, you know, Bangladesh, which was considered when it started, because of the way it was treated, it was like a basket case of the world. But today, no such thing.
True.
You know, it has a very strong economy, very successful economy, and it can hold its head high without anybody thinking that they stretch out their hands, you know, to ask. They don't do that. Now they stretch their hands to shake your hands,
Mhm.
not to ask something of you. Now this is largely because of the kind of vision and the work that somebody like Sheikh Mujib did. This film, I should have been completed I should have completed the shooting by now. Unfortunately, this pandemic has come in the way, so we haven't been able to start making the film. But hopefully, we should be able to start post September of this.
Sure. Wonderful. So, thank you, Shyam, for this lovely time, you know, spending so much time on our channel and, you know, being so patient with all our questions. Lovely talking to you, and God bless you. And, you know, we'll, of course, chat offline. Yeah. So, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Bye. Bye. All
Bye.
the very best for your channel.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.